And today we'll continue with Kingsguard. Suppose we should get moving. It's almost here. Everything sounds Every day it sounds like the unholy wailing of corrupt spirits and wicked demons screeching from the pits of hell. What was that? Nothing. Let's just hurry along so we don't miss the train. Despite being in the lead, you could tell he was forcing himself with each step. The lion's tail was wrapped tightly around his leg, and with the third whistle he nearly jumped out of his greaves. The two of you followed a crowd of people, all headed towards an austere yet beautiful brick and glass building. It was a central station that allowed one to board the iron horse, a mechanized cart nicknamed as a train that traveled around the city and the stores with the noise and smoke. It was created by inventors and scholars from Azite, an independent city nation of Yaza. When your father caught wind of such a marvel, plans went into effect for making space to have it implemented into the city. It took 10 years for it to be completed, but it was well worth the time, effort, and energy. The metal vehicle was truly an impressive machine that allowed one to visit all four corners of the city within an hour, but that wasn't all it was useful for. Information could be transferred across long distances within a fraction of time, and it also aided in the trade of goods and services, helping grow many businesses. Because of the overwhelming popularity of the Iron Horse, plans were already being put into effect to create a nation-wide line to connect all the cities together. It truly was a herald of a new era, the era of machines. You know, kind of like the Industrial Revolution, kind of. There was also a lot of inventions in the 1700s, so maybe it's like the 1700s, or maybe this is kind of like based on the 1800s, in my opinion. I think it's kind of like the start of their version of the industrial area, like in the mid 1800s, like with trains and steamboats. It cut down time significantly, and people are able to conduct goods or able to conduct services faster, and well, people are able to go to places for services much faster, and people can transport goods faster, and just the function of the entire society, it it progresses much faster. People are able to do everything much faster, and that helps the economy grow even more. And everything is so time consuming. The train sounded one last whistle, informing everyone in the vicinity that it had arrived. Leon froze to his steps, and his hand gripped down on your arm tight. Ouch, no. Oh, sorry. Suppose I'm still a little agitated from earlier. Careful or you'll break off my arm. But right. Leandros loosened his grip and he wailed at your sore arm, hammering it up just enough to hopefully make him feel guilty and possibly ease up on your punishment later. Well, let's go. I may be Prince, but it's not going to wait for me. Perhaps it might be best if we go back home. As well, you could always use some exercise. After what happened today, absolutely not. You always kind of had a lot of exercise. Just went away from you, but maybe we could get a horse then. Like, you like riding horses, right? Leon? Yeah, that sounds better than getting in the rusty thing anyway. Come on, Kaiten, let's go. I think there should be a stable nearby. Despite how much of the populace had nothing but praise for the Leon horse, there were always the naysayers and skeptics who refused to step foot on the machine over even acknowledge or even acknowledge its achievements. Leandros was one of those people, always preferring to avoid taking the train as much as possible and choosing to walk on white horses. But there was no way you were walking back, and the horse ride was always bumpy. The train had soft seats and would get you home without you needing to lift a finger. Leon, you're free to walk or ride a horse or whatever, but I am too tired for that. I'm taking the train. Can't be reasonable now. Leon, you don't have to be so afraid of it. What? Afraid? Don't be ridiculous. I just refuse to let you step foot aboard such a obvious death trap. Death trap? What? Never mind. Look, the line is already moving, so the train is boarding now. If we don't hurry, we're going to miss it. Now, are you coming or not? All right. This time you took the lead, guiding Leandro towards a queue of individuals all waiting to board the iron horse. There was a menagerie of citizens all lined up at this time of day, mostly workers who were finished with their jobs, but you did spot a few nobles heading home after a luxurious day of shopping. While the line moved on, a duo of exhausted workers complained to one another, and you felt your ears stretch a little in their direction. It wasn't eavesdropping, but it was a bit hard to ignore them. I swear, it's the same shit day in and day out. We got on the train in the morning, worked for that bastard for barely any coin, then hopped back on the train to head home to our nagging wives. Nothing ever changes. What's a man gotta do to catch a break? Ain't all that bad. At least you and the missus ain't starving anymore. You hear about Danny? Things got so bad for him he had to resort to stealing. That idiot spent all his coin on booze. He dug himself his own grave, and now he's digging the mines in Renero. I ain't asking for much, just a little change is all, a little excitement in my life, you know? So damn strung up all the time, working these long hours. Even then, when I get home, the damn missus don't want to do anything except go to bed. We said we'd get rich, live up in the pearl, and have 1,000 servants. Why, when we were younger, there wouldn't be an alley we didn't. I think I got just the thing you need. Yeah? What's that? Why don't you take a look over there? You followed the man's gaze over towards a gaudy-looking establishment where several scantily dressed men and women awaited out front. They waved and ushered pedestrians into their establishment with enticing stares and honeyed words. That floozy house ain't like the others you've heard of. Oh, I've heard of it, alright. They got beasts going there too. Yeah, and it ain't like you gotta sleep with them. Got plenty of nice, supple-titted women just begging for a man. They'll do almost anything you ask for. Huh. The missus would kill me if she caught me in there. Well, as far as she knows, you're still at work. Boss can be so demanding, kept you late. Or maybe the train stopped running, you had to walk your way back if you catch my drift. Thinking about it now, my favorite goddess might be there today. It can't be serious. The worker smirked and then started off into the direction of the building, and a woman took him by the arm. He turned back away before heading inside. Damn bastard, gonna get me beat for this. What the hell? Got paid a little extra, and I need a little something to take the stress away. The other man sauntered on forth, leaving a gap in the line as he was greeted by another woman who also took him inside. Lucky. No. Huh? No. What? You know what? What? That wasn't going to. The line caught you staring over at the bordello where the two men had just entered. The new scantily dressed greeters, males this time, came forth from the building and began to attract new customers with their exotic dances. The establishment was named Rose's Cathedral, a place of desire that made true all manner of pleasurable fantasies. It was one of the few brothels in the city that catered to men or beastmen of any race or color. If I had a silver for every time you said that, you're mistaken. Alright, so I was looking. You caught me. But it wasn't like I was going in there, and I wish you would never go in there. You have a reputation to uphold, after all. To who? Not like anyone in the kingdom knows who I am anyway. To the other nobles. Let them think what they want. Not like they can do anything about it. Father pretty much keeps them at bay. It's not just that you know. I plan to keep my promise till my last breath, but that won't protect you if someone else sees you and begins to spread rumors. You're going to see, you're going to be king soon. We'll be needing a queen. All this fooling around, we need to stop eventually. It had been so long that you nearly forgot the promise Ronald made to you, of a secret that you never even told your father for fear of his reaction. It all started on a cold winter's day some several years ago. As per nightly tradition, and in quite a rebellious stage of your life, you quietly snuck out of the castle to make a visit to Rose's cathedral. He gave you a coin, and a handsome, broad-chested, brown-haired man guided you to a room for what should have been a pleasurable evening of intense passion. As it turned out, you weren't so sneaky, as Alonzo saddled you all the way to the establishment and walked right in on you in your lusty chauffeur. You would never forget the look of disbelief on his face as he stood in the doorway, unable to even speak. Needless to say, you were in as much shock as he was, and couldn't find the drive to continue despite your seducer's advances to ignore the intruder. When Leandro finally regained composure, he walked back out the door, head low, as though he were ashamed to see such a thing. You thought he would turn back to the castle to tell your father of what he had seen. But when you redressed and stepped outside, there he was, arms crossed, stoic face like your father, and ready to take you home without a word. From that day forward, you dreaded every waking hour, wondering when he was going to bring it up. It wasn't until days later, at the end of a sword training session with him, that he decided to break the ice. He wanted to shrivel up like a slug in the summer. This was a truth that you had hoped to keep secret till your grave, and now one of the worst people you possibly knew. But your worries, your concerns, your fears, they were for naught. He didn't chastise you or tell you that you weren't right in the head, but rather he consoled you and tried to understand. He didn't care who you were attracted to. He just wanted to know why it was that you felt the need to hide it. You burst into tears, crying more than enough to fill the ocean twice over. It was the most memorable heart-to-heart you ever had with him, and from that day forward, he made a promise to keep it to himself. Especially with what would happen if some of the nobles found out. Not all of them were honorable, and with such gossip they could gain so much, hanging it over your head. You doubt even your father could do anything to stop them. It's not easy being a prince, I know that, but you have to understand that there are consequences to your actions. Alright, I got it already. I'm not allowed to even have fun and must remain in that dusty old castle for the end of my days. Then when I get old, grouchy and miserable, and on my deathbed, I'll finally be set free, just like Father wants. That's not what he... Forget it. We'll talk more about this later. Regardless how many times Gondos warned you of someone finding out, you still never learned your lesson, and went right back to sneaking out in the castle at night. Of course now, that damn lion knew where you had snuck off to. It wouldn't be long before he would burst in on you in the middle of your fun, then proceed to stand there waiting until you got dressed and left with him. It was so embarrassing to have to be dragged out like a child. Even the patrons and workers started to give you a nickname, the princess, due to how often the hero would come to save you. Little did they know how close of a mark that nickname was to you. Your father's overbearing nature made sure the citizens knew not who you were other than a select few nobles and knights. They probably thought you were nothing more than a young noble with plenty of coin to spend and an overactive libido rather than a prince in line to be king. Of course, you did cut it close a few times when Leandros nearly made a slip of the tongue of who you were when he would pick you up. One of the guys out front waved at you and waved back with a giddy little smile. For the love of go, go. Leonard grabs you by the hand again, and you were whisked away onto the train. Your last sight was of them giggling, likely thinking of you once again being saved by your hero. I finally had a place to rest my feet. You plop down onto the comfy seat and stretch your legs out, taking up the entire space. Being in first class compartments was the greatest of luxuries. You had spacious and comfy seats, priority when entering and exiting the train, and best of all, you had the space for your soul. There was only one time that you had consciously made the decision to immerse with the common folk, as you called it, and sat in the third class carriages. The seats were made of wood that made your back and butt ache worse than a day on the saddle. Kids screamed and cried in your ear, and some drunk fellow smelling heavily of piss and alcohol nearly fell asleep on you. After that, you made sure to never make that mistake again. Leandros was slow to ease himself into the cabin. He was already a pretty big man, and with his armor on, it only made his entry more difficult. He cracked open the window to let in some fresh air before he sat down. Even though the train wasn't moving, he still sat stiffly with his arms crossed and teeth tapping impatiently. It was impossible to ignore how much noise he was making, yet he always got this way whenever you took the train. Hey, Lean. Yeah. Okay then. Don't scare me like that. Scare you? I was just trying to. Look, if you really aren't feeling up for the train, we can leave. No, I'm fine. Really? We still have time before it departs. Forget it. We're already here. Just hold on to something secure. Once the train began to move, his nails pierced the plush cushions, while his fur bristled like a porcupine. Caden, are you holding on tight? Holding on to what? We're not going that fast. It's just a precaution. You never know what may happen. Nothing's going to happen. We've witnessed this how many times now? I don't trust this thing. Several dozen injured and 10 killed when this thing crashed in Renell. That was years ago. Besides, it was an accident when the driver stopped the train too suddenly while traveling at full speed. As the iron horse picked up momentum, Leandros only tensed even further. For a lion, don't you think you are being a bit cowardly? What about all those times you had to fight against multiple bandits all by yourself? I'm not fighting bandits. I'm riding in the belly of a 5,000-pound monster made of steel and wood, hurtling us at God knows what speed. He scooted himself closer to the window and let the wind whip through his mane. Things were never going to change with him, and soon his incessant feet tapping was accompanied by even more annoying drumming of his fingernails across the windowsill. You weren't certain how much more you could take. There had to be some way to get him to calm down or to get over his fear of trains. You needed to get his attention away from the fact that he was riding the train and had him focus on something else. He was a busy man, something always on his mind. But whenever he got on the train, he could only think about his survival. Like this would be his final resting place. Hey, if you keep staring out the window like that, you're only going to get even more nervous. I'm not nervous. Then why do you look so tense? You're crouching like you're set to jump out the window at any moment's notice. I'm fine. Then perhaps you might want to ease up on the cushions. You're about ready to whip the stuffing out of them. Donald looked down and retracted his nails. The fabric looked a tad bit stretched, and there were a few pieces of loose stitching sticking out, but nothing too bad. Why don't you try close your eyes? Not going to happen. Not on this hellbound metal wagon. You leaned forward and put your hand on Leandros' second paw, causing him to nearly leap out of his seat again. Just take a deep breath and close your eyes. You'll feel better. Mother always taught me to do this whenever I was scared. Perhaps it might work for you. I'm not in the mood to be consoled by you right now. It's either that or you can just suffer the rest of the way. You better not be thinking about running away from me again. And go where? Out the window? I've seen you do dangerous stuff before, like jumping down those stairs. You could have been seriously injured, you know. Damn it, just close your eyes already. Alright, but don't you think for a second that my guard's down. Leandros took a deep breath and closed one of his eyes. Both of them. He had every right to be skeptical, but still it was a bit irritating that he didn't trust you on this. I'm not going to do anything, alright? He slowly closed his other eye, his face tense. His eyes swiveled to left to right, gathering information, preparing him for what may happen. You could tell that he was ready to leap at a moment's notice. It really was a mess. He felt like a parent consoling a child, and eventually his face softened. Huh? We're here. Leandro stared out the window almost in disbelief, and lo and behold, the train was pulling into the station. So we are. And see, nothing happened. Yeah. For a second, Leandro moved his lips as though to say something, but instead he sealed his lips and stood. Alright, time to go. The nobles and your father are waiting. It seemed as though he wouldn't let your act of kindness sway him from his task at hand. He was still hell-bent on taking you back to the castle so that you would attend your own party that you had been dreading all day. At the very least, you could tell that he might be more lenient on your punishment for leaving the castle or getting into such trouble. Finally, to be on solid or moving ground. Leandro stepped off the train and ran a hand through his mane to calm it back, hoping to regain his composure after what you saw on the train. It seemed like he would still have a long way before he overcame that fear. You should be thankful for it, you know. Without the train, we'd likely only be halfway up Main Street by now, even with horses. Time is not an issue. When your safety is my top concern. Let's hurry on. Leandro quickly reached for your hand, and as though he were worried you would try to run off again. I'm not a child. I know the way home. I imagine, but it makes my job easier keeping you close by so that you don't have any detours. Leandro held on tighter and started forward. He wasn't giving you any chances to slip away. As he stared straight ahead, the sight of a Yasin castle loomed in the distance. It was impressive and beautiful as always. A gilded cage just waiting for you. But first, you needed to pass through the gates to the Gold District, the highest and richest district in the city. Ahead was an ornate gate of stone, iron, and gold that isolated itself from the rest of the city. Not just anyone could pass on through. Here, only nobles, wealthy merchants, or personally invited guests were allowed passes beyond the guards at the front made sure of that. Welcome home, my liege, Captain. A stern bull, plated in silver and gold armor, stiffly saluted the two of you as you approached the gates. Thank you, soldier. I assume there has been no trouble while I was away. None, Captain. Been quiet as a bishop in worship. Good to hear. If he would. Oh, right away, Captain. The bull quickly turned and gave the signal to another guard to open the gates, granting you passage to the Gold District. Captain, about that incident several nights ago. That is an issue to be discussed in private, soldier. Right, my apologies. The knight quickly bowed his head low and returned back to his post with a much more wigged poacher. Come, Caden. Incident? Nothing for you to be concerned about. Leandros kept a straight and serious face. Something was up, but it would be useless to try to glean any information out of him. He was as tight-lipped as they came. Right as he crossed to the other side of the gate, he found a horse-drawn carriage already waiting to take you up to the castle. While it wasn't much of a walk, you could already tell that your father wanted you home as swiftly as possible, evident by the necessary precaution in front of you. Once inside, there would be no escape. You would be attending that party. The servant opened the door, and you resigned yourself to your fate. The servant gave you a quick briefing of what to expect at the castle, which guests had arrived, and the overall schedule for the evening, but your mind wandered as you stared out the window. The city streets of this part of town were as pristine as ever, and smells much more fragrant and palatable. Nobles and wealthy merchants leisurely strolled through the streets without a care in the world, but with the lack of crime, who could blame them? It was the safest place in the city, reserved for the elite or those with surplus money to spend. Because of how exclusive this part of the city was, there was always tall tales of this district floating around. Streets paved with pearls and gold, a fountain on every corner, and every home had a servant and a servant for their servant. The only time a commoner was ever seen here was when they had an audience with the king, but most issues with the masses were solved by the knights before being presented before your father or at times yourself. But everything felt distinctively fake and artificial, perhaps because it was just too peaceful, that and it lacked spirit. In the distance below, there was always something going on. At all hours of the day, it was exhilarating and thrilling to have things so chaotic and, for lack of a better word, lawless. And while there is much wine to drink, I must also advise my liege to restrict themselves to a single cup per hour. My liege? What? My liege, did you catch the single word I said? Oh, something about there being plenty of wine. I see that you are plenty distracted. Count Leandros, I do not see how you have managed to keep your head when dealing with the prince. That's just it. I'm feeling certain I lost my sanity long ago. Ha ha. Well, regardless if you were paying attention or not, I'm sure you needn't have us to remind you to be on your best behavior. Yeah. You turned your attention back outside to Havana Castle, a stone fortress situated along the edge of a cliff, giving breathtaking views of the ocean from its perch. One final gate separated the castle from the gold district. This one even more extravagant than the last, guarded by knights in glamored armor that made you wonder whose outfit was worth more, yours or theirs. We're here. And look, Father even has something else prepared for you as well. You pressed your face against the window of the carriage and glared outside. Seriously? Well, you are the man of the evening. It's only appropriate to announce your arrival. A suite of knights were all standing shoulders to shoulder, creating a path for you right up to the front doors. Talk about overbearing. Is he going to announce whenever I leave to take a shit too? Not a bad idea. We could always use more eyes on you. You're starting to make me regret not going along with that rat. At least he treated me like a regular person. If you honestly believe that being bound, gagged, wild makes you a regular person, you're mistaken. The prince was what? Forget it. The moment you stepped off the carriage, the grounds were filled with blazing trumpets singing a short and cheerful tune. In unison, all the knights stiffened their posture, unsheathed their swords in a dramatic pose right towards the sky before bringing them back down parallel to their faces. Once the ditty was over, the doors to the castle opened up and a servant stepped forth from the castle with a scroll in hand. His Royal Highness, Prince Cadenber Yasin, first and only born son to King Reinhard Yerlassen, and Queen Elena Lerjassen has returned. If you were, Your Majesty, the guests await your presence. The servant bowed deeply and pointed to the side, giving you an unobstructed path inside. If you were only if you were any other person, you would have been flustered and flattered about the reception. It was only grandiose and truly made you feel as though you were on top of the world. But you loathed these kinds of gaudy presentations. It was always just pretense, a way to boost standing in appearance. Your father likely planned this out as well, a way to penetrate you before the guests, as though he honestly cared about you. To his side, several aristocrats stared in wonder, clearly falling for such a charade. You could already see their eyes twinkling with glee as they thought of their daughters walking down such a stage with arms hooded in yours. It would be a long evening if you had to avoid talking about conversations such as marriage and succession. But that was likely your father's plan all along, a way to make you all the more presentable to potential suitors. You wish you still had your cloak that Leandros whipped back at the Colosseum so that you could hide your face. Speaking of the line, he gave you a gentle push, shoves you forward, and you had no choice but to head inside. The news of your arrival spread through the castle like wildfire. Right as you entered the foyer, the guests all quieted down and turned to greet you with regal bows and curtsies. You smiled and waved, trying to put on a brave face. Hastening your steps to get to the ballroom where the wine awaited. Leandros was much more constrained to the customs of proper etiquette and ended up getting caught behind as he ensured to bow to each and every noble as he passed. Unlike with you, though, they simply responded with a fierce glare in their eyes and a snap of their heads to show their contempt and disgust. There was always a social stigma around beastmen, and the ability for some reason were the first to show their true colors. It might have been out of fear, jealousy, envy. There were too many reasons to count. He had no qualms with beastmen. Leandros had been by your side your entire life, and while you had no other siblings, he felt far more like an older brother to you than a royal protector. In particular, Nancy couple sneered quite loudly before turning to you with the most innocent and gracious of smiles. You wiped imaginary dust from your shoulder as you walked past him, causing them to babble behind you, sounding more appalled than anything. Once you were well enough away, Leandro spoke up. Kaden, I thought we went over that you need to be on your best behavior. What did I do? I think you know. That was very disrespectful. Look, I know that you detest these kinds of formal gatherings, but there is no way to treat your guests that came all the way to see you. They came here because my father asked them to, not because they actually care about me or this coronation. Besides, are you really going to berate me for my actions after their reactions to your greetings? I really just don't get how you can lick their boots every year like you do. That's just how it is for beastmen. There's no point in changing their minds. They are free to think and feel as they wish. There isn't an issue here. Your soldiers, even most of the citizens, even the beastmen, all respect you. How were you? How how you were born should have nothing to do with them not giving you the proper recognition while they are in the city under your protection. And considering how close you are to my father, you would think they would behave properly. Any sort of disrespect shown to you is the same as spitting in the face of family. They deserve less. They deserve far less attention than you give them, and they certainly don't deserve mine. Why are you looking at me like that? It's nothing. I'm just speaking my mind. It's not any different for them. I really wish that sometimes you'd be more aware of your actions and how they affect how others perceive you. But thank you. I'm happy to know that you still generally care about an old cat like me. Why do you say that like you're surprised? I'm your brother, even if not by blood. While your job as Kingsguard might be to look over me, you still need someone to watch your back when the backstabbers and mudslingers of the court. Those snakes are a ruthless bunch, and if you won't defend yourself from them, then I suppose that I will. And you are supposed to be said guardian, princess. Hey, you better keep that to yourself. You needn't worry, princess. Your secret will remain safe with me. I swear. Now, what do you need to get something to drink? Care for anything in particular? I will have to pass on that. What? Got better things to do than to hang around the prince? As much as I would enjoy staying in your company, I still have to meet with me and the guests. It would be unbecoming of the captain of the guard if I were to be seen drinking while on the job. Well, because you are a beastman and they have such a pretentious attitude about it. Regardless of what they think, it's best not to rock the boat. Anyway, it's time we parted for now. Do keep out of trouble. This is the time for you to gain the noble's favor so that they support your right to rule, not oppose it. And try to enjoy the evening without too much wine. Leandros hurried off to speak with a couple who clearly thought that three was a crowd, leaving you all by your lonesome. I could outdrink an elephant and he's concerned about me drinking? Well, whatever. First things first. To the refreshments. Nobles, family members, merchants, performers, musicians, and servants all mingled throughout the room. It was as crowded as the market streets as at noon, and likely far more dangerous. With pickpockets, you had to worry about your money being stolen, but here you had to worry about your reputation. Coin could always be easily earned again, but a slandered name was something you might have to live with for the rest of your life. Everyone smiled at each other, but all secretly wished to wrap their hands around each other's throats and strangle each other in their lust for power and recognition. It was a game to them, to knock others down alone until they alone stood on top. Everything you did was carefully watched and scrutinized so they could get any dirt on you, but you couldn't care less about what they thought. If you had your way, you could have strutted through the room in nothing but your skivvies, drinking from a bottle of wine and singing a national anthem out of tune without blinking an eye. Politics, deception, and court intrigue was never your thing. Glad you could join us, sire. A servant of the castle popped his way in front of you just as you were about to reach forth towards a server carrying a tray with glasses of red wine. You stood on your toes and attempted to peer past the servant, but it appeared that they had already been swallowed amongst the crowd without a trace. Sire? You dropped your hand in defeat and confronted your distractor. Yeah? I hope I did not interrupt you from something. There was nothing. I could see that father really went all out this year as well. Yes, well, today is more than exceptional. He glanced around to find out where he might be hiding within the crowd. So where is he anyway? He's been in conference with the council since noon. I imagine it had something to do with your disappearance this morning. Well, he should be out shortly. You know how busy he can be. But in the meantime, please enjoy the food and drink. We have imported the finest aged wines from all over. We even have a few exotic dishes from the race. What makes it so exotic? As it turns out, not all of Farhawan is barbaric territory. It seems they do have a few cities that resemble a proper civilization with culture. Those of high standing do have delicacies. If you are of the adventurous type, I urge you to try some. We have plenty of entertainment this evening, the most notable being the talented voices of Franco Francesco and Adelina Callas, who have traveled all the way from Ornello. I've heard they've composed a duet in your honor, and this will be the first night that anyone shall hear it before it is sung in the Mirage Amphitheater. A song in my name? I suppose it wouldn't take much for the king to make a request on my behalf. We all have the traveling performers from Madame Luminista's circus troupe who will be performing the play, The Count of Dusan. And if you make your way to the garden, I think you'll find them performing stunts with their ferocious yet tame animals. I did happen upon a pig and elephant standing on a ball. Can't believe that. My apologies, I didn't mean to lose my composure. Does that ever bother you? Bother me? Why would it? Never mind, just a naive thought. I suppose that sounds rather impressive. I should probably feel flattered that my father has gone all out. It will be a feast for the sisters this evening. Lastly, we will be making space in this hall at the end of the night for dance, which I do hope you will stay for. Dance was never one of your strong features. Even with the best of teachers that father brought in, you could never get too into it. You chalked it up to being forced to dance with a partner that was always of the opposite sex. Worse yet, for the hours wasted having to learn, most of the time you would just be swaying from left to right. I Curtin could do a better dance than Breeze. If you will excuse me though, there are still some things I must attend to enjoy the entire evening. Sorry. The servant bowed once more and scurried off. As he glanced around the room, there was a lot to take in. I suppose since I'm here, I might as well enjoy myself. Now, what did I do first? Tucked up tight to the east side of the room was a long table covered with food. The smells that wafted from around there was exquisite, nearly making you salivate with hunger. You allowed your nose to guide you to the room and stopped in front of a fully roasted pig, still fresh and steaming as though it had just come out of the oven. A smorgasbord of meat and seafood dishes flanked the swine from both sides, while hors d'oeuvres and desserts took up the ends of the table. There was so much food you didn't even know where to begin. A servant made his way over in hopes to assist you, but he quickly soothed them away and began to help yourself. You probably could have filled your entire plate if it wasn't for a wiggle ice sculpture that caught your attention. It was a nearly life-size replica of yourself, slowly melting away. To sculpt something that enormous was already an incredible feat, and with how much ice must have been wasted from the ice house to make it was a bit startling. But there was one thing that your father was good at. It was showing off that he really went all out this year. Always with extravagance. Droplets of water ran down from their eyes and dripped from the cheeks where it pulled into a basin. A moment later, you heard a crack and then a small splash that made you leap away, nearly spilling your food. When you looked back at the sculpture, the nose had fallen off. Just wonderful. With the heat in the room rising from all the people laughing, singing, and dancing, it would only be a matter of time before the entire statue shattered. And it being so close to the food likely wasn't helping its short and fleeting life either. It was an ominous feeling, watch that statue of yourself melt and slosh to pieces, enough to ruin your appetite for sure. You took several bites of the food, then set your plate onto the table and walked away feeling deeply disturbed. A small stage was set up near the stairwell for two affluent and well-known singers, Franco Francesco and Adelina Callas. To have them here was an honor for the royal family and likely for them as well. While he had never actually been to Renero, you heard stories of the two singers always performing to a full house and leaving with nothing less than a standing ovation. Imagine anyone other than your father being able to pull off a feat such as convincing them both to travel and perform anywhere other than the Mirage Amphitheater. After all, they were a venerated duo, and their price was likely high. Just like they had it all. Fame, fortune, good looks, especially Franco, whose devilish handsome looks easily hooked your attention. You had only seen paintings of Franco, but they could never capture the details of him in person. His chiseled chin, groomed mustache, and piercing eyes made all the ladies swoon over him, making you a little jealous that they had a better chance than the prince himself. Well, if those ladies were all to you, they would just turn them down anyway. Why not have them swoon over Franco? And while Adelina wasn't your cup of tea, You could not deny her beauty, and neither could several of the noblemen, hoping to at the very least see her dance with a starlet. They were performing a beautiful song with such elegance and clarity you could not tell who was the better singer. Franco's deep voice was enough to send the audience to their knees as several glasses began to shake as Annalena hit high notes. Then the last note was sung. When the last note was sung, the two performers bowed and curtsied to enormous applause, yourself included. They rose back up and stepped off the stage to mingle with the crowd and rest before their next song. He wanted to step forth to greet the captivating Franco, but a crowd of fevered noblewomen had already gathered around him. Even as a prince, you doubted you would have been able to part them for a single handshake. Another time, I suppose. He wistfully moved on to see what other entertainment was prepared that night. The words of that servant had intrigued you. An elephant or a ball? That sounded absurd. If anyone could train an animal to do such a feat, it would be the traveling circus. Now jump. The music in the air was energetic and bouncy, far more lively than what was being played inside. He moved around the crowd of guests and gathered around the garden to witness the spectacle of tame animals performing tricks. A large cat of some kind, a cheetah or a jaguar, perhaps. You couldn't tell it was some kind of yellow and black spotted animal dancing around the garden and jumping at a woman's command. She was dressed in a vibrant red, white, and black get-up and held a taunt whip in her hand that she cracked at the cat whenever it tried to lash out at her. Despite a few close calls, she remained out of the range of the animal's fangs and claws and commanded the beast to continue the routine. Now up, up. The cat hopped up on a stool and reared its back legs and stared forward with a bit of hesitation. In front of it was a flaming ring, for which you could only assume was for the beast to leap through. Several nobles whispered among themselves, nervous of what would happen should the trick go wrong. All right, leap. The cat took a few moments to correct its balance before it seemingly found the courage to launch itself through the burning hoop and landed gracefully on a stand on the other side. All right, everyone, let's give a round of applause for Kita the leopard. All right, girl, in you go, that's it. The gorgeous-looking leopard was guided back into a metal cage right next to a variety of other animals, and paced for a few moments before finally deciding to lay down and rest. Kita is one of the newest additions to our family, but she has quickly been making strides as a crowd favorite, but we have one last show for you this evening before we wrap up. The ground shook as a large decorated elephant was brought forth and a wooden ball was held into place as the creature started to make its way onto it. Ellie here was found in the Farhorn wilds, a baby separated from its tribe. They had already moved on, so we decided to add her to our family. She's a very docile creature, but so I will ask you to hold your applause and or any other kind of sudden gestures or noises until the trick is over. The gray giant stepped onto a platform that assisted its way onto the ball. Then, after several careful baby steps, she was traveling atop the sphere. It looked as though she was going to fall over a few times, but she maintained balance and rolled a short distance before being let down. Let's hear it for Ellie, everyone. The garden was filled with chatter amongst the nobles. All I guessed that such a large thing could so easily maintain its balance on such a small ball. Even you were quite amazed. Sure, dogs and cats could be trained by an elephant. It certainly was a wonder. Thank you for joining us this evening, folks. We hope that you enjoyed the show. The animals were all hauled away, and the garden was settled down to a few nobles mingling about. When it started to get a bit chilly, you headed back inside. Nearly everyone in the room had a glass in their hand, and it was about time that you got one too. You searched around the room for a servant, but all of them seemed to have magically disappeared. What's a prince have to do to get a drink around here? All the guests turned towards the stage to the same sound of trumpets a familiar tune that he had not forgotten from your earlier from your arrival earlier. A stern-looking man dressed in the most extravagant of fineries, with a golden crown perched upon his head, stood regally atop the stairwell of the ballroom. The same servant who graced your presence from outside stood next to him with a scroll outstretched in hand, presenting his royal majesty, Reynard, chosen line by the will of the gods, king of the great nation of Yasin, guardian of freedom and faith. His resonating footsteps echoed through the ballroom as your father stepped forth to address himself to the crowd. His gaze slowly moved through the audience until they locked onto you. His face turned sour for only a moment before he turned his attention back to the crowd as a whole. I thank you all for traveling to be here this evening at celebration of my son, Prince Caden's name day. Your father extended out a hand to point out where you were in the crowd, and once the guests had followed the line of sight, they knew it was you. Perhaps it was for your own safety, or maybe your father was just that much of an overbearing person, but your identity was a closely guarded secret reserved for only the closest of nobles. The nobles around you parted, giving you space and making a trail leading all the way up the stairs. Your father looked at you expectantly, wishing that you would join him, but you wanted to have nothing to do with him. He always expected things to go his way, always wanted to take the lead, and for you to follow without complaint. You stood your ground, and your father scowled for just a second before bringing his hand down. 37 long years have passed since the last coronation was held within these walls, and I have grown old. It won't be long before I, too, like my ancestors, must hang my mantle and pass on the crown. As per tradition, with tonight being the 20th year since my son was born into this world, he is now of age to wear the crown. It must seem like quite the possessor of the notoriety, the wealth, the glamorous lifestyle, but that is far from the truth. As king, I hold a very nation on my shoulders that is a difficult task for any one man to hold. My word may be law, but that doesn't mean that I can simply do whatever takes my fancy. A single decision could put a kingdom to ruin over the course of a single night, whether that be from invaders from the outside or from descent from within. But it can also bring prosperity, growth, and unity. A stable mind, an honest heart, and a true love for all the lives who live in this great nation are the necessary qualities one must have, must strive for, and be a leader, a ruler. But there isn't a doubt in my heart that once my son takes charge, our nation will rise to even greater heights. For many of you, this might be the first time that you have laid eyes on my son. Perhaps some of you have doubts. When I first rose to power, it was the same with me, but given time, I would like to say that I have gained your approval, and I hope that all of you will assist him and extend your blessings as well. We have a long road ahead of us all. We have a long road ahead of us still. During these past few years, we have seen hardship despite the many decades of peace Torvair has been given from the great and merciful gods above. The emergence of the madness, for one, cropping up across the land like an effective blemish, instilling fear into our hearts and taking away loved ones. We may not know what causes such a terrible affliction, turning a friend into foe, a sweet and kind family member into some kind of murderer. But together we can and will fight through this and find a cure to find a sickening plague. But despite the horrors of the world, we also have seen great progress as well. Look no further than Azite and their modern marvels that have made life so much easier for our kingdom. The iron horse that took nearly a decade to build was all thanks to your support, and look how it has benefited our own city. Y'all are the pillar of this great nation, and for us to stand tall, we must ensure we assist one another. And for us to continue to grow and thrive, we must all work to mend any cracks that appear in our foundation. And this is how we have always lived and how we should continue to live. I hope that you will accept I hope that you will all accept my son should anything happen to me and work with him to keep Yasin the shining beacon of the world. I have confidence in him and I hope that all of you do as well. Now then, enough talk. Tonight is an evening of celebration. Please eat and drink at your leisure. I spared no expense at bringing forth the best wines and foods this nation has to offer, no matter what horrors the darkness may bring. Yasin still stands till dawn. Yasin still stands till dawn. It wasn't his most memorable speech. You could tell by the way he spoke, listening in on the signs that gave away how he was making it up as he went along, but the crowd still loved it all the same. Despite how much you detest your father's voice, his speeches inspired and changed people. Even one as simple as this held much power in it. And once again, he was making decisions that involved yourself without first conferring with you. For all his talk of you being next in line to be king and trusting you to hold the crown, you doubted you would have any say in the decision making. His council would probably take care of everything. You would be nothing more than a decorated token with a shining crown on your head. What infuriated you even more, though, was the fact that he dropped the ball so subtly, just casually announcing you to the nobles like that. Yes, it eventually had to be done. Maybe he had something planned tomorrow, like a parade through the city to show you off to the people, but right here and now, without your knowledge, it took you off guard. It was like some kind of play scripted by your father. If it wasn't for the guards that had been following you around the castle at a distance, you have already stormed up to your bedroom by now. The music picked up again, and he bounded down the stairs to mingle with the nobles. Despite the speech being over and the festivities and music was in full swing again, there was this bubble around you that the nobles in the room seemed to avoid. They likely weren't entirely certain what to expect. To reveal who the prince was as much as a surprise to you as to why it was so difficult to get a single drink tonight. You spotted a server in the distance holding a tray filled with several glasses and a bottle in the center. Before they two vanished, you moved onwards right into the crowd before they could part around you again and headed straight for the servant. The space behind you filled back in again, but none approached you. I need a drink. Oh, sorry, good evening. I'm sorry to ask this, but may I inquire as to how much you might have drank this evening? Excuse me? It's just our father said that. I don't care what my father may have told you, but I need a drink now. He reached for the bottle in the center before the castle servant could move it away and took a quick drink. Sorry, I'm assuming he told you I was only permitted to have one glass per hour. Well, yes, but this bottle is made of glass, correct? I suppose that's true. So by that logic, it is fair game, as I currently haven't had anything yet to drink. You took another swig from the bottle and quickly wiped the juices from your cheek. Cheers and happy birthday to me. You glance around the room for a suitable place to drink where you wouldn't be bothered. Right now, you didn't want to be badgered with questions from inquiring nobles about what you would do as king and why you were kept secret for so long. Some alone time, some alone time with your thoughts and time to simmer down is what you needed right now, but there wasn't a spot in the room that wasn't crowded with nobles. You decided to instead head over to a set of double windows that led out onto the balcony overlooking the city. It was nice and peaceful outside. The music and constant chatter was dulled, giving you time to actually collect your thoughts. The air was cool and crisp, and the wine down your throat warmed you. The stars shined brilliantly in the sky, and the sounds of the ocean just not far off was such a nice change of pace. For several minutes, you relaxed on the ledge of the balcony, swirling around the red liquor in a bottle and every so often taking a few sips. So this is where the man of the evening decided to vanish off to. Spend it all alone now, are we? The chilling voice startled you just as you were taking a sip of wine. The strong liquor was sent down the wine tube and it irritated your lungs. Once you finally caught your breath, you noticed him. It was always the eyes that you saw first. Those eyes that reflected the light of the moon and sent shivers down your spine since you were young, as though he were stepping right out from the saddles themselves emerged a fox beastman. Oh, that hurt. You patted your chest several times and wiped a tear from your eye. Casiro, you nearly killed me there. My apologies for that. I didn't mean to startle you. I thought you saw me alive. No, not when you're hiding in the dark like that. Well, I wouldn't say I was hiding. Casiro, like Leandro's, was also a royal protector of the Kingsguard. While his duty was to keep the royal family safe from harm, he was mostly in charge of protecting your father, like Leandro's was you. But that wasn't his only job. The fox was a talented sneak, for lack of a better word. He was talented enough to vanish into thin air in the blink of an eye or hide within the saddles. Because of his unique talents, he was an intelligence agent for the kingdom, gathering secrets, informing the king of activities within and outside the capital, and keeping any classified knowledge locked away. Of course, he wasn't. Of course, when he wasn't off, who knows where or doing who knows what, he was always snooping about in the castle and hiding within the saddles. It gave you goosebumps every time you looked over your shoulders, and his eyes were there as if he was stalking you. So I heard from Leandros that you were spying on me when I left the castle. I thought I made a clean getaway. I was careful to make sure no one was following me, but it turns out that wasn't the case. Got a lot of nerve to show yourself after ratting me out. I'm sorry. I just felt that it would be necessary to have someone keep an eye on you for your own protection. The city is dangerous, even in the warmth of the sunlight. I just did not wish to see you get hurt, is all. Yeah, well, I can take care of myself, you know. I really am sorry, but it is my duty after all. Suppose Leandros would have found me anyway. He always seems to know where I am. To be honest, I didn't even know you were still in the capital. It's been a few weeks since I've seen you. My apologies. I hope I didn't worry you. I wouldn't say I was exactly worried. Conceivable was kind of aloof at times. With every person you have ever met, you could never get a read on them. Some people showed their intents in their body language, the way they spoke, their emotions and expressions, but Conceivable was an absolute enigma from the day you met him. You were about 6 or 7 years old when he was brought to the castle. You didn't exactly know the reason why, other than that he was supposed to be a king's guard for your father. Why he hadn't had one up to this point, you didn't know, or maybe you had forgotten either way. Even Leandros was appointed your protector from the moment of your birth. He never talked of his past, no matter how much you inquired, and his emotions always seemed to be in check or rather muted. Still, you never really had a problem with him. He mostly kept to himself, never complained. He was always willing to listen. Though, because of his distant nature, the castle servants were always a little wary of him, dubbing him the faceless one, because he never showed his true emotions no matter what. It was only really recently that he started to show any emotion you noticed seemed to be only with you around. Is everything to your liking so far? The king spared no expenses this year. I heard that the war treasurer had cried himself to sleep every night while writing in his ledger. I'm surprised father didn't just invite the whole kingdom into the castle. Well, I suppose that might have been doable given enough time. Sending out invitations to everyone wouldn't have posed much of a problem with gossip through a word of mouth, but the real problem would have been how to get everyone into the castle. Cyril, that was a joke. Oh, my apologies, I didn't realize. You're almost as stiff as Leandros, and that's saying something. Well, I had my doubts at the beginning, other than that hideous ice sculpture. The food, wine, and entertainment is plentiful, so I suppose I can't complain. Then I'll take that. Then I'll take it that this is a success. May I ask why you are out here, though? Surely the guests must be eager to converse with you. I'm not particularly fond of mingling with this crowd. Besides, Father just dropped the ball that I'm the prince, and I'm not exactly in the mood to answer 1,000 questions. I had to take a break from everything that was going on inside. How about you? Concerned about me? I'm simply waiting. Waiting on who? For your father. Never know when you're needed. Father is busy chatting with all the nobles. I doubt you'll be called upon for anything. Unlike me, of course. He had Leanos drag me back here just to show me off like a sculptor. Honestly, I wish he just get he just get hit by a wagon. You and your father don't seem to get along. Took you that long to know us. He's not the most charming person to be around, at least when I'm in the room. He just makes my blood boil whenever he opens his mouth. If he's not telling me what to do, he's yelling at me. What about you, though? I've never once seen your parents nor heard of them. They, I'm sure they are doing just fine. You don't talk with them. What keeps me busy? Well, if they're not on your case every hour, they can't be all that bad. Take another large swig of your drink, then make a disgusted face. Lately, whenever you had any sort of alcoholic beverage, most of the taste seemed to disappear after a few glasses. It was like you were building up a sort of immunity to it. Getting drunk was actually pretty difficult as well. For you to even begin to get tipsy, you had to consume copious amounts of liquor in a short time. But the effect wasn't enough. Was it really worth the? But the effect wasn't really worth the effort so much. So most of the time, you simply enjoyed it for the taste. You really must have a cast iron liver to consume that much. I can't imagine that is good for your health. Huh. This weak stuff just passed right through me. I had twice as much last year, and yet I'm still alive and kicking. You know what? Here, tastes a bit stale. Going to need to get you somewhere. Going to need to get you to get something else. He handed the bottle to the fox, who took it with a bit of hesitation. Cautiously, he smelled it before setting it down on the railing. Caravan blood. This is about as strong as it gets. Perhaps they should think about cooking up something a bit stronger. Try a bit, though. It'll help you relax. If your father found me drinking, he would skin me, but I thank you for the gift regardless. Well, it's getting a bit chilly out here. I'm going to head back inside. A frog in a well knows nothing of the sea. So words of wisdom for me? Interpret it as you may, but from where I come from, it is a lesson learned at a young age. What you have been taught or seen, what you have been taught or seen may not always be the truth. That's what I've taken from it. Many destroy themselves because they become too overconfident and blind themselves to the realities of the world. I know you're not one of those people, but it never hurts to be reminded of what little we all know. Part of the reason why I read so much, there's much knowledge to be gained from books. My father never let me leave the castle anyway, so I had to find some way to pass the time. I'm sure there will come a time when you will understand why he makes the choices he does. If that day ever comes, I'll be sure to bring a blanket to prepare myself for when hell freezes over. Speaking of freezing, I'm going in. You coming? I actually should be checking on something myself. Alright, I guess I will see you some other time. Kaden, if you ever wish to talk, Hmm? Never mind. Take care. Without saying another word, he melted into the saddles once more. Hey, are you still there? He waited for him to reply, but none came. Other than the door back into the ballroom, there was nowhere else for him to go unless he jumped off the edge. He took a quick peek over the railing and glanced down. It was about a 500-foot drop down, not the easiest route off of the veranda. Cautiously, you took another look around, your eyes straining in the darkness to catch a glimpse of him or his eyes. It appeared as though you were alone. You should really think about working for the circus with a massive trick like that. You stared at the bottle he left untouched and picked it back up. We'd be ashamed to waste this, though. He turned back towards the doors and headed inside. Oh, stop right here. Alright, so we finally met Casiro. Got his name mixed up with another character in the game. But anyway, we met. We finally met Casiro, and he's very secretive, and he doesn't really let his emotions show out. And he's very stealthy, and kind of like a ninja, really. Very similar to like how a ninja operates. So we met all three of the characters. Well, I mean, technically we saw all three of them, but we haven't really met all three of them yet. I mean, we met Leandros, and we just met Casiro. I mean, we saw Ramos fight in the arena, but we actually haven't met him yet. So it's really Ramos that we haven't met yet. So it might be I think we might have to wait. It might take another video or two before we finally meet him. So I mean, we just saw all three of them, but we haven't actually met with Ramos yet. We just met Leandros, and then we met Castillo just now. I guess so. So I'll save the lore for next time, so we get to know about the characters and in the world that they're in. So the father, the king, is very overbearing, and Caton very much does not like his father. Very bossy, very domineering. I mean, he does have the good qualities of a king. He made a very good speech. I mean, even though he wasn't prepared for it, he was able to think of a speech as he went along. So that was very smart and intelligent of him. Quick thinking. So we got to see all the extravagance of the of the ceremony. A glass sculpture of Caton, and yeah, that's really, you really are at the very top of it. You have a glass sculpture of yourself, well, ice sculpture anyway. You really at the top when somebody makes an ice sculpture of yourself in a circus, and the best musicians are there, and you got nobility there who had no idea who the prince was until the king revealed it to be Caton. So apparently the nobility really weren't that interested in talking with Caton. So I guess a lot of people are very skeptical of him. I mean, personally, about Caton, I think he could be a good king. I mean, he seems to be more eager about the common person and what's life like being a commoner. So he does. I do give him high marks, like being willing to understand like the lower classes, but he's kind of reckless. Him drinking and running off. I mean, he could have gotten himself killed. I mean, out there with those rats from the last video. So I understand he wants to go out He'd be stuck in the castle all the time, every day. But I mean, when you're the prince, you're the most high-profile figure in your kingdom below the king. I mean, sometimes you gotta take extreme measures to keep you safe. I mean, maybe they could try. Well, he's about to be king, so his life is going to be even more restricted. He's going to be even more busier. So you know, maybe they can work something out with Case and have him go out a little bit more, but with security. So, so we met the king. Even he's just kind of like a black shadow. We don't. I mean, we kind of see him, but we kind of don't see him also. Like a lot of the characters in here. So the only characters we've really seen, really, are all the Beastmen we've seen. Like those rat bandits and that rat leader and Leandros and Casiro. So I'm gonna stop right here and we'll continue with Kingsguard next time. Thank you all very much for watching. Goodbye.